Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Herkese merhaba. Tekrar Ankara'da olmak çok güzel. I'm grateful for the invitation to speak at this important workshop in sustainability in the mining sector. And I'm delighted to see such a strong turnout. You should see it from where I am. The room is full, huge ballroom, such a good sight. And it just reflects how important the mining industry is right now, this attendance. We're here today because we want to ensure a strong and prosperous Turkish mining industry. And we also want an industry that is responsive to growing expectations from foreign investors and the public for adherence to responsible mining principles. Mining has been an important part of Turkey's history dating back some 12,000 years, when huge limestone blocks weighing as much as 50 tons were quarried in Göbekli Tepe to build impressive pillars with carved reliefs. Those structures are some of the most impressive examples of stonework from Turkey's ancient past. Exploration, of course, did not stop with stone. It has been suggested that early copper originated from a massive copper deposit at Ergani Maden. Experiments with copper and with copper ore ultimately led to technological developments that in turn ushered in the Bronze Age about 7,000 years ago. Iron ore was another major discovery. It has been estimated that the transition in Anatolia from bronze to iron technology took place about 5,000 years ago. Precious metals, such as silver and gold, have been produced in Turkey since the beginning of ore mining. Today, and it's already been mentioned, today, of the 90 ore types listed in the mineral commodity summaries published by the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, 70 are present in Turkey, and 60 of those are currently mined and traded. I'm going to repeat another statistic for you that's been mentioned already. Turkey has been ranked 22nd in the world in terms of mineral production in tons and 28th in terms of dollar value. While mining contributed more than 11 billion lira to the Turkish economy in 2009, the value soared in recent years, exceeding 46.7 billion Turkish lira in 2019 and growing by an impressive 23% in just 2020 alone, reaching a record value of 59.2 billion Turkish lira. Mining now accounts for 1.17% of Turkish GDP. Of course, the sector is also a major source of employment, with over 126,000 persons working in all areas of the mining industry here in Turkey. And Turkey is on the cusp of greatness in terms of further developing its mineral resources. It is, without a doubt, one of the world's most promising and dynamic mining destinations, with an estimated 40% or more of its prospective mining areas still not fully explored. Already the largest gold producer in Europe, just last year, a massive 20-ton gold reserve worth $1.2 billion in the province of Agri was announced, along with the additional discovery in the same region of a 3.5-ton silver reserve. With so much mineral and mining potential, and given the government's priority to encourage private investment and to develop mining into one of the country's leading industries, it is little wonder that a growing number of overseas mineral companies are active in Turkey, including large and mid-tier firms from Canada, the United States, Great Britain, and Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, over thousands of years, the fundamental purpose of mining has remained the same: to remove metals and minerals from the ground and to separate those that are desirable from the waste. A miner in Anatolia 5,000 years ago would recognize the basic fact of digging into the ground to find the earth's riches. However, as the history of mining development in Turkey so clearly demonstrates, the scale of mining sites worldwide has changed dramatically since those early days. Over a number of centuries, mining has been and continues to be an important economic development driver throughout the world. Today, as has been mentioned earlier, its products touch the lives of every person, every day, in numerous ways. Almost everything important to our contemporary lifestyle, aircraft, trains, cars, batteries, satellites, cell phones, including even fiber optics, all of these are made with mined materials. Until relatively recently, mining technology focused on maximizing outputs while minimizing business costs. Yeah? Yeah, okay, yeah. This approach helped fuel economic growth across countries, create jobs, and provide the raw materials needed to build all those things we use on a daily basis. But it also resulted in an increase in CO2 emissions and concerns about environmental and social issues. Which brings us to today. There is no question this conference is taking place at a crucial point in time. Worldwide concern about the environment has never been more intense. Climate change can no longer be considered a future threat. It is upon us now, and it is accelerating. It is impacting the planet in terms of increased floods, fires, and droughts, which in turn are exacerbating economic, social, and regional disparities. Droughts and water shortages in particular can be crippling in terms of crop and livestock production and can often be a precursor to wildfires that devastate forested areas. No part of the world is immune to climate change. Not Europe, not the Americas, not Asia, not Africa, and certainly not Turkey. As Agriculture and Forestry Minister Pakdemirli noted in comments reported in the media last year, agriculture and food are among the most vulnerable Turkish sectors affected by climate change, with declining agricultural yields estimated to be in the 10 to 25% range over the next 30 or so years. In today's world, there is an expectation that all sectors, mining included, need to take appropriate steps to fight climate change. As we all know, As we all know, government leaders around the world have increasingly reinforced the importance of dealing with the climate crisis. And last year, nations made a collective commitment to take more aggressive steps to combat climate change. The challenge now is to translate national pledges into concrete action for individual sectors. I'm just going to repeat that. The challenge now is to translate national pledges into concrete action for individual sectors like mining. And for that to happen, governments and the private sector will need to work hand in hand to build policies and action plans. Following the lead set by national governments, including Turkey, industry leaders around the world are increasingly focused on addressing the climate change issue. Earlier this year, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager with assets in excess of $10 trillion, announced sweeping changes to the fund's investment strategy, recognizing climate change as a defining factor in any company's future. Mr. Fink acknowledged that climate change is fundamentally reshaping finance, just as it is causing companies, sectors, and entire countries to reassess their core assumptions of what the future holds. Larry Fink is not alone. The Chief Sustainability Officer at BNP Paribas, Hervé Duté, agrees. He refers to the energy transition as an all-hands-on-deck crisis, and he has called for mandatory ESG disclosures from major corporations. That's a very strong statement coming from Europe's largest bank. And it is clearly a position that is being embraced by institutional investors around the world. Indeed, an increasing number of institutional investors are looking at environmental, social, and governance, performance, and ratings as a proxy for good management and risk mitigation. Just to drive home the message, consider that late last year, shareholders at Exxon, the huge American multinational oil and gas corporation, replaced 3 Exxon directors with candidates proposed by a hedge fund pressing the company to better prepare itself for a low-carbon world. However, despite a growing number of firms announcing net zero goals, there is currently little information from corporations on strategies to achieve those goals. So they've announced the goals, but how are they going to get there? They haven't announced those steps. Many feel this general lack of corporate action will lead governments to develop regulations that will make it mandatory for firms to demonstrate their net zero strategies. And more than just focusing on carbon emissions, these strategies will embrace ESG implementation. In fact, they already are. The EU, for example, has been very forceful in developing and implementing ESG-related policies. In particular, the EU's Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which came into effect last year, is designed to drive capital toward sustainably oriented investments. In general terms, this regulation aims to ensure that asset managers, financial advisors, and other financial market participants take into account sustainability and other ESG factors when they make investments and also when they provide information about those investments. The regulation is part of a wider European sustainable finance package that requires firms to integrate ESG considerations into their investment decisions and the advisory processes in a consistent manner. The regulation is widely considered to be the broadest regulatory action in sustainable finance to date, and as such, it should be the gold standard, pardon the pun, for other countries as they develop their sustainable policies. Clearly, the days of measuring corporate success slowly on the basis of profitability are a thing of the past. For investors, for supply chains, for customers, and increasingly for governments, the focus is on emissions reductions and other ESG criteria that are of equal importance. These issues include, among other things, biodiversity and hazardous substances, labor practices and worker and community health, along with ethics, legal compliance, and transparency. Making profits remains crucial, of course, but not at the expense of broader ESG elements. So a question to ask right now is, how much international scrutiny do you think there will be in the mining sector in terms of meeting ESG objectives? Or to put it in a different way, do you think mining will be a large target or a small target? And a related question is, what are the implications of promising big but not delivering substantive results? There's certainly a case to be made that mining will be one of the bigger targets in the global drive to decarbonize the environment, especially since it is estimated that the world mining industry contributes 1.9 to 5.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere each year. Nations with the largest mineral production will certainly be watched closely. This includes such countries as China, Australia, the United States, Indonesia, and Canada. Turkey is much further down that list for now, generating about 2 million tons of CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions annually. But production in Turkey is increasing, and there is tremendous potential for the country to become a major supplier of key minerals, especially as more mines come on stream and as other mines go deeper into the earth. Given the growing scrutiny by institutional investors, national governments, concrete steps to ensure that firms take concrete steps to diminish their carbon footprint, greenwashing, which refers to any efforts by countries to exaggerate their ESG credentials, will only serve to scare away investors. A key message here is that companies that set thoughtful ESG goals, create well-resourced plans to achieve them, and demonstrate a commitment through action, not just words, will do well in terms of both attracting future investments and expanding market potential. On the other hand, firms that simply pay lip service to sustainability and fail to deliver meaningful results will pay a price in the long run. A key challenge for many nations right now is that while they have set net zero policy goals, and some, for example in the EU and the United States, are developing financially related ESG criteria, the missing piece is the need to establish consistent roadmaps on how specific sectors, such as mining, are going to contribute to reaching national carbon and other ESG objectives. Private sector mining organizations in some countries have already taken steps to address the issue. Australia is one of these countries. Mining is big in Australia. In fact, it's Australia's single largest business sector. Mining accounts for about 10% of the country's GDP. It is big business and it's big pollution. Not surprisingly, carbon reduction should be a priority for Australian mining firms, and it is. The Australian mining industry took a big step last year in coming to grips with the emission issue when the Minerals Council of Australia formally adopted the Towards Sustainability, or TSM, program developed nearly 20 years ago by the Mining Association of Canada. Turkey's mining industry is also aware of Canada's TSM program. Last year, the Turkish Miners Association and the Mining Association of Canada took part in a webinar that focused on how the TSM initiative can transition mining into the ESG future. Some of you may have joined that webinar. I know Mehmet Bey was in that webinar. Briefly, TSM is a globally recognized performance system that helps mining companies evaluate and manage their environmental and related responsibilities. It provides a framework that drives performance while also ensuring that key mining risks are managed responsibly. It commits the industry to both high standards and to community engagement in an open and transparent manner. The PowerPoint slide you see right now is a partial list of TSM criteria. Further details are available on the Mining Association of Canada website. In addition to Canada and Australia, TSM is now formally recognized in 7 countries, namely Finland, Argentina, Botswana, the Philippines, Spain, Brazil, and Norway. TSM is mandatory for members in Canada. What's even better, many Canadian companies operating in international markets follow TSM practices in their overseas operations. That includes Canadian mining firms operating in Turkey, where it's been estimated that Canadian investment in Turkey in the mining sector is at about $9 billion. As you are well aware, Canada is one of the leading mining industries in the world and one of the largest producers of minerals and metals. The mining industry accounts for about 20% of all Canadian exports. Toronto is the international hub for mining finance accounting for nearly 40% of global mining equity raised over the last 5 years. 40%. As you also know, because so many of you attend the PDAC mining conference each year, Toronto is home to the world's largest annual mineral and mining event. And thanks in part to the TSM program, Canada is one of the safest jurisdictions for mining in the world. So if firms in big mining countries like Canada and Australia have adopted TSM principles and with good results, it stands to reason that more Turkish firms should consider doing the same. Having a framework such as TSM to identify issues that need to be addressed and that sets out a plan for reaching ESG sustainable objectives, that's a necessary first step. It's not the only step. Ladies and gentlemen, real change happens when technology becomes an integral part of the planning process. Mining operations face multiple obstacles. Most mines are located in remote locations, so labor and energy remain a constant overhead. And now there are the added pressures from government, investors, and stakeholders to improve energy efficiency, to reduce CO2 emissions, to support workers and communities, and to do all of that in an open and transparent way, also remaining productive and profitable. That's a high bar. And that's where research and development can make a real difference. Alternative energy sources, as has been mentioned, are becoming a more viable option for the mining industry. With the emergence of electrical vehicle batteries, solar panels, and wind turbines, the shift to renewable energy sources in mining is becoming more feasible. The use of green hydrogen, although cost prohibitive right now, is another potential energy source that a number of mining countries are following. The electrification of mining equipment, such as diesel trucks and gas-consuming appliances, can certainly contribute to decarbonization. Devices now can be installed on equipment and vehicles to monitor emissions and to track progress in reducing them. Look at it this way. What you can't measure, you can't manage. What you can't measure, you can't manage. By installing sensors, telemetry, and connectivity solutions, mining operations can establish a baseline and start measuring what matters. Things like CO2 emissions, fuel consumptions, cycle time, operating costs, tire consumptions, and idling, which contributes to about 8% of fuel consumption. Mobile devices, like phones and tablets, have replaced the clipboard and the pen. Any data collected manually can be sent to the relevant database instantly, and those readings can be used to keep or change performance parameters to bring about more efficient results. There is also the opportunity to create better performance in shipment tracking, route optimization, and fleet dispatching. Now, purchasing existing technology or investing in new technology will certainly drive up costs in the near term. And these will surely be reflected in selling prices. They have to be. But those higher costs should be weighed against the long-term benefits, including increased efficiencies, the improved health and safety of workers, and cost savings in the long run as ESG technologies become more mainstream. No longer are the goals of productivity and ESG sustainability mutually exclusive. Technological advances can provide for both. Just to repeat, the goals of productivity and ESG sustainability are not mutually exclusive. Technology can make it happen. Aligning sustainable targets with the goal of lowering cost per ton can go hand in hand, and as a result, can improve financial performance, reduce maintenance costs, and increase equipment productivity for mining operations. All of this can pave the way for reduction in CO2 emissions and a greener and more sustainable mining industry. Here's a short list of some initial steps mining companies might consider in their bid to become more sustainable. Creating a position for an ESG expert who can keep on top of emerging trends and policies and grants and funding programs. and ensure that mining operations are on track to achieve ESG objectives. Every organizational chart should include an ESG position. Just to repeat, every organizational chart in mining firms should include an ESG position. Engage with stakeholders, including local communities, and determine the expectations of investors and supply chains. Identify key sources of emissions and explore ways to reduce them. Encourage board members to endorse ambitious emissions targets that will get the company to net zero, and very important, don't just make those targets, but track your progress in reaching those goals. Where possible, shift to renewable power generation and invest in energy-efficient technologies. And finally, identify actions that will benefit the bottom line while also promoting social responsibility at both the community level and for employees in the plant. Ladies and gentlemen, no sector, mining included, should be expected to develop sustainability objectives on its own, while Turkish mining firms know the industry best, its strengths, its weaknesses, its opportunities, and its threats. It will be important for the industry and government to work closely together to address carbon emissions and other ESG issues in a constructive and meaningful way. Only by doing this will sustainability criteria and benchmarks for the mining industry align with national aspirations and expectations. Clearly, both the Turkish government and the mining industry recognize this. This workshop is an excellent example of industry and government sharing ideas on how best to work together on developing a common roadmap towards sustainability. And there are certainly other examples, one being when the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges of Turkey, or TOBB, was preparing its recently released report titled Turkish Mining Sector Development. In that instance, TOBB consulted with officials who report to Energy and Natural Resources Minister Donmez. A key objective of the report was to identify emerging economic, social, environmental, and governance issues in the Turkish mining sector. The renaming of the Ministry of Environment and Urban Planning to the Ministry of Environment, Urban Planning, and Climate Change late last year was a move that clearly signaled that climate change is at the top of the agenda for the Turkish government. This coincided with Minister Karum's announcement of the decision to establish a climate council consisting of stakeholders and experts from all sectors of the economy who will plan how to reach net zero emissions. As discussions get underway to define, implement, and enforce sustainability objectives in Turkey, issues such as these may be discussed. In terms of standardized benchmarks, ESG measures must be consistent, understandable, and achievable across the mining sector. This should apply to both public and private firms so that all companies are reporting on the same criteria on an equal footing. In terms of executive compensation, linking executive pay and bonuses to ESG targets is an increasingly common method of embedding a focus on ESG performance in the FTSE 100 companies. According to recent research published by PricewaterhouseCoopers, almost half of the FTSE 100 companies have an ESG target in annual bonuses. And it's expected that a greater number of companies will include ESG measures in the near future, since it ensures accountability at the highest corporate levels. In terms of investment promotion, providing additional funding and investment incentives tied to ESG principles would send a powerful and positive signal to international investors that Turkey welcomes new mine and mineral processing development in a sustainable way. That would certainly attract the attention of Canadian firms who already recognize both the mineral potential of Turkey and the skilled workforce in the industry. With added investment incentives tied to ESG criteria, which Canadian firms already practice, most of them, a stronger Canadian presence here would make for a most productive and profitable match. There's no question that minerals will be a key agenda item for the second meeting of the Turkey-Canada Joint Economic and Trade Committee, or JETCO. The JETCO would serve as an ideal platform to outline new incentives to increase FDI in the Turkish mining sector. In terms of research and development, the Turkish mining industry would also benefit from increased funding for R&D for products that will help achieve a smaller carbon footprint. This could involve TÜBİTAK in Turkish universities, with the potential to link with similar foreign organizations in mining countries that also promote R&D in the mining sectors, for example, in Canada. In terms of supply chain resilience and security, with the added urgency since the onset of COVID-19, governments around the world are assessing the vulnerability of their respective economies to sudden supply shocks for critical minerals. So we heard about that earlier this morning. Of course, you know about it already. Specifically, these are minerals and metals that cannot be sourced domestically in sufficient volume or at all, but which are essential for the proper functioning of the national economy. Given the increasing propensity for supply chain disruptions, it would be prudent for government and industry representatives to explore a range of measures to improve the resilience of Turkish supply chains and develop response capabilities to potential supply chain disruptions. Measures could include market assessments, as well as determining the potential to stockpile strategic minerals, including critical minerals used, for example, in the electrical vehicle and clean energy sectors. It goes without saying that given the immense production base of this G20 country, it would be prudent to ensure output is not disrupted due to future pandemics or to new and sudden geopolitical events. Before closing, I would like to spend a few moments to discuss the E in ESG, and specifically issues that pit environmentalists against mining development. I'm sure many of you know of Mr. Alpan. Perhaps you were a student of his, or maybe you read one of his books on mining. He is certainly a legend in the industry. And years ago, he saw quite clearly the interaction between nature and mining, how one can intersect with the other in a positive way. Too often in these times, that view is in the minority. Around the world, and right here in Turkey, the debate between environment and the economy is becoming increasingly contentious and polarized. The win-lose mentality that pits business against environment is unhelpful at best and destructive at its worst. Turkey is a major mining producer, and there is no question that production will ramp up considerably in coming years. It's a given, it's a fact, it's going to happen. A key challenge in future mining development is one that is all too familiar in Turkey and in so many other countries. That is the challenge posed by environmental activists who, in many instances, do not even live in the communities where mining permits will be issued. Mining becomes an emotional issue, and emotions can easily overtake rational thought. Consistent engagement with communities located near future mining sites is so important in getting the right messages across. The situation is much better when citizens can see firsthand the strict environmental controls followed by mining firms and the substantial economic benefits that accrue to communities. One example of how mining and nature can coexist in a mutually beneficial way is the Prairie Creek zinc mine located in the middle of the Nahanni National Park Reserve in Canada's Northwest Territories. As with any debate over land use, there have been many opinions about the project. Stakeholders involved in the negotiations around establishing the mine included all the key players: Canadian local Indigenous groups, recreational outfitters, environmental groups, scientists, industry reps, along with provincial and federal government representatives. The good news is last year, the federal government approved a 170-kilometer all-season access road for the Prairie Creek mine. And this is what the mining site looks like today. It's not the only example. There are many, many mines in Turkey that, as Mehmet Yilmaz has said, conduct clean business with clean people in a clean environment. So with the right planning and messaging, good things are possible in mining development. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an opportune time for Turkey to become known as a world leader in sustainability in the mining sector. Turkey can become a world leader and sustainability in the mining sector. Through best practices, long-term planning, and government support mechanisms for the industry as it transitions to cleaner technologies, carbon emission goals in Turkey can be achieved, investors will be strongly attracted to the Turkish mining sector, and local communities can actually become advocates for future mining developments. I'm honored to have been invited to join this workshop, and I look forward to hearing the views of others in this room over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.